Welcome to episode 262 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's July 20, 1885. We're in London, at the Football Association, and after years of argument, accusation, hypocrisy, class anxiety, and northern pressure, the FA finally permits professionalism. Footballers can be paid, openly, legally, within limits of course, because this is still Victorian England. But the principle changes. The game can no longer pretend that players are only gentlemen playing for exercise, virtue, and fresh air. The worker who loses wages for travel for an away match can be compensated. The club attracting big crowds can pay the men people came to watch. The best players can start becoming employees, not secretly, not through a job arranged at a factory, not through boot money slipped into the changing room, but paid. And that means this is one of the most important administrative days in football history. Not because professionalism begins on this day. It doesn't. Professionalism had already arrived. But because July 20, 1885 is the day the FA stops pretending it can stop it. But how did we get here? We start with 1863. The Football Association is founded in London in the world of clubs, schools, solicitors, officers, teachers, and public school habits. For those men, football is recreation, a moral exercise, a game played around work, not instead of work. So at first, the amateur assumption doesn't need to be defended with much force. No one in that room is imagining the footballer as a wage earner. But then the game spreads. The FA Cup begins in 1871. Railways make travel easier. Saturday half-days give working men space to watch and play. Industrial towns in Lancashire and the Midlands and Scotland take the game seriously. Factory owners and local businessmen see two things at once. Crowds will pay to watch, and crowds want the best players. That changes everything, because amateurism looks very different depending on your class. If you have private income or a comfortable profession, you can play football for nothing. If you're a factory worker, miner, or railway man, an away match can cost you a day's wages. So the question becomes simple. Is unpaid football really moral, or is it just affordable for the right kind of man? And clubs start finding answers outside the rules. They offer jobs, housing, meals, travel expenses that are more than travel expenses, and most famously, boot money, small payments hidden in a player's boots. Then come the Scots. In the 1870s and 80s, Scottish football is admired for its passing game. English clubs want that style. Darwen, in Lancashire, bring in Fergus Souter and James Love, two young Scots. They are often remembered as early professional footballers, though the word is still dangerous. They're not supposed to be paid for football, but somehow they are there. And Darwen become a symbol of the new northern game. Then Blackburn Olympic make the point louder. In 1883, they win the FA Cup. A northern working class club beats Old Etonians in the final. That matters. The old amateur elite can still talk about ideals, but now the cup has gone north. And the north is crowds, ambition, and players who cannot live on ideals. Then comes Preston North End and William Sudell. Sudell is the club's secretary-manager, and he is clear-eyed about what football is becoming. He brings in talent, especially from Scotland. He finds players work in Preston. He pays. He improves the team. And in January 1884, Preston play Upton Park in the FA Cup. Upton Park, a London amateur club, complained to the FA that Preston are professionals. Sudell doesn't really deny the reality. He argues that paying players is common practice. The FA disagrees. Preston are expelled from the FA Cup. Then Sudell refuses to apologize. His line becomes famous. Preston, all are professionals. And now the issue is no longer hidden. Other northern clubs are paying too. Bolton, Burnley, Blackburn Rovers, Aston Villa, Sunderland. The threat becomes real. If the FA will not legalize professionalism, the northern clubs may break away and form a rival British Football Association. That is the crisis. The FA can protect amateur purity and risk losing the strongest clubs. Or it can compromise and keep the game under one roof. On July 20, 1885, it compromises. Professionalism is legalized, but not as a free market. Paid players must be registered, and clubs can only pay professionals who were born within or had lived for 2 years within 6 miles of the club's ground. That restriction is important. The FA is not saying, let football capitalism run wild. It is saying, we accept payment, but we still want control. Still, the breach has been made. Football has crossed the line. But so what? Well, first Preston. Legal professionalism helps turn them into the first great professional machine. They become the Invincibles. In 1888-89, Preston North End win the first Football League title without losing a match. Then they win the FA Cup without conceding a goal. The double, unbeaten, the professional future, wearing white shirts. Then the Football League. Once players are paid, clubs need regular income. Income means regular fixtures. A cup run is exciting, but it is not enough to sustain wages. So in 1888, William McGregor of Aston Villa helps create the Football League. 12 clubs: Preston North End, Aston Villa, Blackburn Rovers, Bolton Wanderers, Burnley, Derby County, Everton, Notts County, Stoke, West Bromwich Albion, Wolverhampton Wanderers, and Accrington. That is the next step. Professionalism creates the economic problem. The league creates the schedule, and the schedule creates modern club football. The split with amateurism doesn't vanish. It hardens. Some clubs and institutions continue to treat amateur football as morally superior. Corinthian FC becomes the great symbol of that tradition. The FA Amateur Cup begins in 1893. The amateur idea survives for decades, but it is no longer the future of the elite game. The crowds are going somewhere else, to the paid game, to the league game, to the Saturday habit. Then comes the control system. Because legalizing pay doesn't mean liberating players. It means regulating them. Registration ties players to clubs. Transfer systems grow. Wage restrictions arrive. The maximum wage becomes one of English football's defining structures. Players can be professionals, but not free workers in the modern sense. That fight lasts a long time. The Players' Union, Billy Meredith, Jimmy Hill, the maximum wage finally abolished in 1961, which I talked about in episode 79. The retain and transfer system challenged, George Eastham, freedom of contract, and then much later, Bosman in 1995, which was the topic in episode 45, and the Premier League in 1992, when English football's professional economy changes scale again. So the line from 1885 doesn't run neatly to today's salaries. It runs through a century of argument about who owns the player's labor: the club, the association, the league, the market, or the player. That argument begins when the FA admits the obvious. Football work is work. And then there's the global point. England legalizes professionalism early because the industrial game forces the issue early. Other countries move on different timelines. Italy formalizes professionalism early, through the 1920s. Spain's National League begins as a professional competition in 1929. Argentina turns professional in 1931, which was our OTD episode 199. Brazil in 1933. Germany waits much longer. The Bundesliga only starts in 1963. And Olympic football remains trapped in amateur arguments for most of the 20th century. So July 20, 1885 is not just an English administrative date. It's one of the first cracks in the old amateur world. Football had been born in organized form through rules. Now it was becoming an industry. And that is the uncomfortable truth. Professionalism didn't corrupt a pure game. The money was already there. The crowds were already there. And the payments were already there. Professionalism made the hypocrisy governable. Before we go, 3 things to take away from July 20, 1885. First, the FA didn't invent professional football on this day. It legalized what northern clubs had already made real. Second, the debate was never only sporting, it was class. Amateurism was easier to defend when you could afford to play for nothing. And third, professionalism made the Football League almost inevitable. Once players were paid, clubs needed regular fixtures, regular crowds, regular income, and modern football began to take its shape. On this day in 1885, the Football Association finally permitted professionalism. The player could be paid, the club could become a business, the league could become necessary, and football stopped pretending it was only a gentleman's pastime. That is all for episode 262 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. Let's make a deal. You rate the show 5 stars, and I'll keep pushing interesting stories like this one from the beautiful game's history in front of you. Tomorrow, go to July 21, 1991, when Argentina, without Maradona, won its first Copa America since 1959. See you then.